picture this 30,000 years ago, somewhere in Ice Age Europe. A small group of humans sits around a fire as snow drifts silently across the landscape. The flames crackle. Children sleep beneath animal hides. Hunters return from the darkness carrying meat. At least, that's the image most of us imagine. Ancient humans as relentless hunters, spear in hand, always chasing mammoths, always eating meat. But what if that picture is wrong? In 2010, archaeologists studying microscopic traces trapped inside ancient human teeth found something unexpected. Tiny particles of cooked plants, wild grains, underground roots, even evidence of starch. That discovery raised an uncomfortable question. If ancient humans were supposedly living almost entirely on meat, why were their teeth filled with plants? And that wasn't the only mystery. Researchers examining Stone Age camps across Africa, Europe, and Asia kept finding strange clues. Grinding stones worn smooth long before agriculture existed. Charred seeds buried beside ancient hearths. Residues of nuts, fruits, and tubers preserved for tens of thousands of years. The evidence seemed contradictory. Humans clearly hunted. But they were gathering, processing, and cooking plants too. So which story was true? Were our ancestors primarily hunters, gatherers, scavengers, or something else entirely? The deeper researchers looked, the stranger the picture became. Because ancient humans survived in deserts, rainforests, frozen tundra, coastlines, mountains, and grasslands. No single menu could possibly explain all of them. Think about that for a second. For more than 95% of human history, there were no farms. No wheat fields, no rice paddies, no supermarkets, no domesticated animals. Yet somehow humans spread across nearly every environment on Earth. How? What exactly did ancient humans eat before farming? And why does the answer reveal something extraordinary about what made our species different from every human that came before? The obvious answer seems simple. They hunted. After all, ancient archaeological sites are filled with animal bones. Mammoths, bison, horses, deer, antelope, wild cattle. Our ancestors clearly killed enormous numbers of animals. Some discoveries are astonishing. At a site in Germany known as Schöningen, researchers uncovered wooden spears nearly 300,000 years old. They were carefully balanced, remarkably sophisticated, and apparently designed specifically for hunting large game. Suddenly, ancient humans no longer looked like desperate scavengers. They looked like skilled predators. And there is plenty of evidence supporting that idea. At numerous Ice Age sites, entire herds of animals appear to have been driven off cliffs or trapped in natural bottlenecks. Imagine dozens of hunters coordinating across open landscapes, surrounding prey, shouting, throwing spears, and working together with incredible precision. Large animals provided enormous rewards. One mammoth could feed an entire group for weeks. Fat-rich meat was especially valuable during cold climates. Animal skins became clothing, bones became tools, sinew became cordage. In harsh Ice Age environments, successful hunts may have meant survival itself. This explanation seems convincing. Humans became dominant because humans became hunters. Case closed, except it wasn't. Because whenever researchers examined regions where large game was scarce, humans were still there, thriving in tropical forests where mammoths never existed, on isolated islands, in deserts where hunting opportunities were unpredictable. Even more puzzling, modern hunter-gatherer societies often obtain surprisingly large portions of their calories from plants rather than meat. Some groups rely heavily on nuts, others depend on roots, some consume enormous quantities of wild fruits. That should have solved the mystery. Instead, it created a bigger one. If humans could survive almost anywhere, and if many hunter-gatherers depended heavily on plants, why do so many archaeological sites emphasize animal remains? Were researchers missing something? The answer lay in a simple but profound problem. Bones survive, plants usually don't, and that realization changed everything. For generations, archaeologists unintentionally told a biased story. Imagine excavating a campsite occupied 40,000 years ago. The meat bones remain, stone tools remain, but berries, leaves, fruits, mushrooms, and roots? Most vanish completely. The result is obvious. Ancient diets suddenly appear far more meat-heavy than they really were. Once researchers realized this, they began searching for different kinds of evidence. That's when assumptions started collapsing. Scientists scraped hardened plaque from fossilized teeth. They examined microscopic plant starches trapped between teeth. They analyzed chemical signatures preserved inside ancient bones. The findings were unexpected. Again and again, ancient humans showed evidence of consuming diverse plant foods, wild legumes, seeds, acorns, tubers, reeds, grass grains, date fruits, even water lilies. In one remarkable discovery from Israel, researchers found evidence that humans were processing wild cereals roughly 23,000 years ago. thousands of years before farming supposedly began. Think about that. People weren't simply grabbing whatever plants happened to be nearby, they were selecting, processing, and sometimes even cooking them in sophisticated ways. But another contradiction appeared. Some Ice Age humans still showed chemical signatures suggesting diets dominated by meat. Others didn't. Why such enormous variation? The answer depended on geography. Picture two communities living during the same period. One survives on the frozen mammoth steppes of northern Eurasia. Plants are seasonal and scarce. Large herbivores dominate the landscape. Another lives near tropical wetlands in Africa, where edible plants grow year-round. Would they eat the same foods? Of course not. And suddenly researchers realized something profound. There was no single prehistoric diet. Ancient humans adapted continuously. They changed their menus according to season, climate, migration, and opportunity. But adaptation alone could not explain humanity's extraordinary success. Other species adapt too. Why did humans outperform nearly every competitor? The next clue emerged not from food itself, but from fire. For decades, scientists debated a controversial question. When did humans begin cooking? At first, many researchers assumed cooking appeared relatively late. Then investigators began re-examining ancient hearths. What they found was astonishing. At sites scattered across Africa, Israel, and Europe, evidence suggested controlled fire may extend back hundreds of thousands of years. Some discoveries hinted at even greater antiquity. If true, this changed everything, because cooking transforms food. Imagine an ancient human digging up a tough underground tuber. Raw, it might be fibrous, bitter, and difficult to digest. Placed beside hot embers, however, it softens. Starches break down. Calories become more accessible. Suddenly, previously useless foods become valuable. Researchers wanted to know just how important this transformation might have been. Experiments followed. Volunteers consumed raw diets resembling those available to early humans. The results surprised many scientists. Maintaining body weight proved extremely difficult. Even with abundant food, extracting sufficient calories was challenging. Cooked food changed the equation. It provided more usable energy while reducing chewing time dramatically. Think about that. Some primates spend 6 or more hours every day chewing, humans don't. Why? One possibility is that cooking fundamentally reshaped our species. More accessible calories may have supported larger brains. Reduced chewing demands altered our anatomy. Greater energy availability may have freed time for social interaction, tool-making, and cooperation, but cooking introduced another mystery. If humans were already processing and cooking wild plants long before agriculture, why did farming emerge so late? People clearly understood edible plants. They had known them intimately for tens of thousands of years. So what changed? To answer that question, we need to follow one extraordinary group living in one of Earth's harshest environments. In the Kalahari Desert of southern Africa lived the Juhanzi, often called the San. Anthropologists studying them during the 20th century expected to find constant hardship. After all, deserts seem unforgiving. Instead, researchers encountered something unexpected. The Juhansi possessed astonishing botanical knowledge. Hundreds of plant species were recognized. People knew which roots stored water, which fruits ripened first, which nuts could be preserved, and which plants became edible only after careful preparation. One food stood out, the mongongo nut, rich in fat, protein, and calories. It could be stored for long periods and harvested reliably across vast areas. Anthropologist Richard Lee discovered that this single resource provided remarkable nutritional security. Imagine walking through seemingly barren desert while surrounded by invisible abundance. To outsiders, the landscape looked empty. To the Juhansi, it was a pantry. Children learned plant locations from elders. Seasonal movements followed ripening cycles. Knowledge passed across generations became as valuable as any hunting weapon. Hunting still mattered. Successful hunts were celebrated. But hunts also failed. Frequently, plant foods provided consistency. And consistency is everything when survival is uncertain. The Juhansi revealed something archaeologists had long overlooked. Ancient humans were not merely hunters wandering randomly across landscapes. They were ecological experts, they carried detailed mental maps of entire environments, they understood migration routes, flowering seasons, fruiting schedules, rainfall patterns, and hidden water sources. Think about how extraordinary that is. Long before writing existed, people memorized immense amounts of environmental information, knowledge itself became food, yet the sand story raises another question. If intimate environmental knowledge was so effective, why abandon it for farming at all? Perhaps because changing climates gradually transformed the world our ancestors knew. As researchers compared archaeological sites across continents, an unexpected pattern emerged. Humans repeatedly expanded into environments that should have been impossible. Consider coastal populations. For years, scientists assumed early humans focused mainly on terrestrial animals. Then excavations in South Africa revealed ancient shell middens, massive piles of discarded shellfish, dating back well over 100,000 years. People were harvesting the sea, fish, shellfish, seaweed, crabs. Marine foods rich in essential nutrients may have played a significant role in human evolution. Then came tropical forests. Deicest forests present unique challenges. Large game can be difficult to hunt. Visibility is limited. Resources are dispersed. Yet humans flourished there too. How? Through diversity, forest populations consumed fruits, nuts, honey, insects, small animals, and countless plant species. Yes, insects, modern hunter-gatherers around the world consume termites, grubs, caterpillars, and beetles. These foods are rich in fat and protein. Ancient humans almost certainly did the same, even though archaeological evidence rarely survives. And then there were the Arctic peoples. In frozen northern environments, plant foods became scarce for much of the year. Diets shifted dramatically toward meat, fish, and marine mammals, same species. Completely different menu. Across Australia, indigenous peoples harvested seeds, yams, shellfish, reptiles, and marsupials. In the Americas, ancient populations exploited everything from giant ground sloths to wild sunflower seeds. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. Humans did not specialize narrowly, they diversified relentlessly. Most predators depend heavily on specific prey. Humans depended on flexibility. When one food disappeared, another replaced it. When climates shifted, diets shifted too. This adaptability may have been humanity's greatest survival strategy, but even flexibility had limits, and occasionally, extraordinary circumstances forced humans into behaviors few people would expect. Not every chapter of prehistoric dining was pleasant. Some discoveries reveal desperation. At several archaeological sites, human bones bear unmistakable cut marks identical to those found on butchered animals. Cannibalism, pretty disturbing, right? Researchers continue debating motivations. In some cases, ritual behavior may explain the evidence. In others, starvation appears more likely. During extreme scarcity, survival rules changed. Another unusual case involves Neanderthals. Chemical analyses initially suggested many Neanderthal groups occupied positions near the top of the food chain, comparable to wolves or lions. This fueled the image of Neanderthals as hypercarnivores, yet later discoveries complicated the story. Plant residues trapped in Neanderthal teeth revealed cooked starches, medicinal plants, and surprisingly varied diets in certain regions. Even our extinct relatives were more flexible than once believed. Then there is honey. Modern hunter-gatherers often value honey enormously, sometimes risking dangerous bee attacks to obtain it. Direct archaeological evidence is rare, but rock art and ethnographic observations strongly suggest ancient humans pursued honey for tens of thousands of years. Imagine climbing cliffs without ropes simply to reach a hidden hive. Why take such risks? Because concentrated sugar was exceptionally rare. These unusual cases reveal an important truth. Prehistoric diets were shaped not by ideology but by circumstance. Humans ate what environments allowed, what knowledge revealed, and occasionally, what desperation demanded. So, what did ancient humans eat before farming? Everything. And that answer is far more important than it first appears. For decades, researchers searched for the prehistoric superfood, the perfect ancestral diet, the single menu responsible for human success. They never found it, because there wasn't one. The deeper mystery was never about specific foods. It was about strategy. Picture two species confronting environmental change. One depends heavily on a narrow range of foods. When conditions shift, it struggles, the other experiments constantly. It hunts when game is abundant, gathers when plants flourished, fishes when rivers teem, collects shellfish during low tide, digs roots during drought, harvests insects when other resources fail, stores food when possible, shares food socially, teaches food knowledge across generations. Which species survives? Humans did again and again. Researchers increasingly believe that dietary flexibility was one of humanity's defining evolutionary advantages, not strength, not speed, not claws, choice. Ancient humans possessed remarkable behavioral adaptability. They explored unfamiliar foods, developed tools for processing them, learned from one another, and transmitted knowledge culturally. Culture changed everything. A poisonous plant to one group could become food to another if someone discovered the correct preparation method. A difficult landscape became habitable once knowledge accumulated. Food was never simply calories, it was information. Imagine standing beside an Ice Age campfire. Around that fire, elders explain where tubers grow after seasonal rains. Hunters describe migration routes. Children watch adults roast unfamiliar seeds. Stories preserve knowledge. Knowledge preserves survival. This is why farming arrived relatively late. For most of human history, diverse foraging strategies worked extraordinarily well. Agriculture emerged only when population pressures, climatic changes, and local circumstances made cultivation increasingly attractive. Even then, farming brought trade offs: harder labor, narrower diets, and greater disease exposure. Ironically, many early farmers were shorter and less healthy than some hunter gatherers who came before them. Think about that. Civilization did not emerge because foraging failed. It emerged because humans, masters of adaptation, found yet another way to exploit their environments, and that ability to reinvent how we obtain food may be the deepest answer of all. Return to that ancient campfire. Snow still falls beyond the circle of light. Children sleep beneath hides. Adults sit together, passing roasted meat, cooked roots, gathered berries, cracked nuts, perhaps shellfish carried from distant shores. No farms exist, no cities, no written recipes. Yet the scene is anything but primitive. Every bite represents accumulated knowledge, generations of observation, countless experiments, successes remembered, fatal mistakes avoided. The people around that fire are doing something profoundly human. They are adapting for tens of thousands of years. Our ancestors crossed deserts, coastlines, mountains, forests, and frozen plains not because they discovered the perfect food, but because they refused to depend on one. They remained curious, flexible, willing to learn. And perhaps that is the real story hidden behind the question of what ancient humans ate before farming. Long before humans domesticated plants, humans had already mastered something even more powerful. They had learned how to domesticate information, to gather it, share it, protect it, and pass it to the next generation. Civilization began long before the first field was planted. It began beside campfires, when someone looked at an unfamiliar landscape and asked a simple question: what here can keep us alive?